According to data from Statista.com, the average price of a new home sold in 2020 in the USA was $391,000. According to Climate Change Realty, the price of finding your real estate agent and creating thousands of dollars in donations to support climate action is and always will be $0. Welcome to the podcast. Steve, great to meet you, man. Thanks for joining me on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Oh, sure thing. Glad to help.
Yeah, glad to have your help, man. We're neighbors.
Yeah.
And we always love to get the podcast started with a bit of background on who you are and how you got to be doing what you're doing at the current moment.
Okay, so you want some history then, huh?
The history lesson. Give it to me.
Well, I don't know how far back I want to go. I mean, in terms of entrepreneurship, I've been doing that ever since I was about 8 or 9 years old. I think I've started 50, 60 different businesses over that period of time. And I always seem to have like 15 or 20 different business ideas on my mind. So it's always just a trick of finding somebody who's into working on them with me. But there's no shortages of new ideas, especially now with things changing so much and the situation becoming so dire in terms of the necessity of getting it together finally instead of procrastinating more.
Were there a couple lemonade stands mixed into those 50 ideas? Or are you talking about like real like businesses, like 50 different business ideas or companies that you started?
Well, everywhere from, they weren't all successful, that's for sure. But, I guess a couple of them went public. There's on the NASDAQ now still. And I don't know, I've had, over 1,000 employees at one point in terms of things. So, and then of course, small things that just fell apart too. So the whole range.
When do you find you come up with your best ideas?
In the morning. I usually get up around 4:30 or 5 and, first 2 or 3 hours of the day is kind of brain harvesting.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
So I have a giant whiteboard in my living room. My whole wall is a whiteboard. And what I like to do sometimes is sit for 3 hours and just think. And I write things down and then I draw lines and then goes to the next idea. And then that spins off into another idea. Do you have any sort of like ritual that you like to do?
Well, not rituals, but, I do stuff like that all the time. So
what do you think is some of the most impactful projects that you've been involved with over the years?
Well, probably one of the first ones is kind of launching the solar business. We had the first store to retail solar panels. Actually, I have a little chart here on the wall I can show you real quick if you don't mind.
Bring it to me. Yeah. And make sure you like elaborate with audio as well. Did you say that you were one of the first solar stores in California?
Yeah, we were the first one to retail solar panels. This was kind of an old ad from one of our suppliers back in those days. So this was a 6-watt panel that was 23 watts. And so you needed 2 of these for a 12-volt battery. So that's $900 for 23 watts wholesale.
Wow.
So it's changed a little bit. Now it's like 50, 75 cents a watt. So
no kidding. So you were the first to retail solar in the country? Because I think California is
there's a big research project they did. It's called Solar Pioneers. And they did research and interviewed all kinds of people and kind of determined that.
And what was it like in the beginning when this technology wasn't necessarily like proven or as verified as it is now?
Well, we were up in Humboldt and Mendocino County, the kind of Emerald Triangle of marijuana farming in California. Uh-huh. This was in the
beautiful,
the late 60s, early 70s, and the reason solar really launched there is because that was the only group of people that needed that type of power and could afford it. Because so I had a natural food store up there that started, I think, 1970 or something like that, and it was kind of it was part of the Back to the Land movement. There's a ton of us left urban areas and moved up into the country. And so we kind of had this little enclave, subcultural enclave up there. It was like a natural food store, but it was more like a community center because, we were just surrounded by rednecks and all this. It was almost like being a black person in the South then in those days, being a hippie in logging country. And so anyway, so we had, just customers coming in and, buying bulk grains and herbs and walking up, torn T-shirts and barefooted and $100 bills falling out of their pockets when they'd walk up and down the aisles. And so, and up there, that was about the only way you could make money is like growing weed. That's where that really started too.
Was that illegal weed?
No, it wasn't legal. No, it's
Yeah, in
totally
California, totally not legal.
Oh no. Well, but in the early days, it was almost illegal, almost legal because they didn't care. And I remember one of my customers called me when it started getting more, when they started busting people, and the police came up and they were, pulling his plants, and he had this big mother plant that he used, and he got in a tug of war with them. The drug agents were pulling on it. He said, "No, I need this plant. This is my most important one." He said, "Well, I've got to keep plants." And so then they said, "Okay, well, take that one instead." And said, "Oh, okay, you can have this one. I'll take that one." So, in the early days, it was pretty mellow. But then when Reagan and Nixon kind of really launched the war on drugs, it started getting
ruined the country,
really serious. And yeah, and that kind of, but anyway, in terms of the solar, that was kind of this unique group of people that both needed that type of power and could afford it, and then them buying it and getting more popular with them. Then prices started coming down, and the proof of concept was out there, and here we are today.
So this is those folks, they couldn't get energy out there any other way, so solar is what made the most logistical sense.
Yeah, I mean, there were other ways before solar panels became available. We were doing micro hydro systems and small wind generators, and we had DC systems. Well, so a lot of times people would, like I did too, had cabins up in the mountains, and you take the battery out of your truck and watch a 12-volt TV at night, and then and just as a safeguard, in case you didn't stop soon enough, you'd always have to park your car or your truck on a hill so that if your battery was dead when you went out there, you could jump start it going down the hill.
Oh, that's funny.
And so we already, sold 12-volt TVs and music systems and 12-volt lights and, all the different accessories. And so when solar panels started becoming available, we already had a system that they could plug right into and be useful immediately.
So when it comes to the specific technology of solar, being there in the very early days and seeing how it's completely taken the whole country, the whole planet by storm now, how has this kind of shaped your perspective on like the nature of technological innovation and adoption just generally?
Well, I've always kind of thought of business as kind of like an analogy to like a big business and small business. Kind of big business is kind of like an ocean liner, and small business is kind of like a kayak. So it's really hard for a big business to be very innovative because it's so expensive and they have so much overhead. And but what big businesses are really good at is taking things and really scaling them up once they prove themselves. So I've always kind of been on the real small, innovative, creative, launching new products, new systems, new ways of doing things. And so, solar was just one example of that. I mean, we just, our solar sales just went like that up until around 2000. And then it's kind of went mainstream. And then all the huge companies started having it. And I lost interest because, it was in a different, we kind of handed it off at that point. And so, it's not like there's a problem with that, or I don't feel resentful about that. I think it's just kind of a organic, natural way for projects to evolve. And we did it with lots of other things. We were one of the first companies to sell compact fluorescents, and that was kind of the same thing. When we first started selling them, they were like $42 a light, And in most companies, it's ridiculous. Why do? And I sell maybe two or three a year, and most companies have just not even considered doing it or just get rid of it right away. But I just always thought it was just this great technology, and it had so many, so much energy potential savings. So I kept doing it, and then gradually our sales just started going like that and like that. And then at one point, we sold more compact fluorescents than anything else, and then it went mainstream, and our kind of chart went crashed again like that.
So do you find that you prefer to be at like the cutting edge of industry because of like the challenge and the thrill of starting a new project, and then once it kind of gets big, it's like less interesting to you? Is that kind of the angle you've taken in business from?
Well, not necessarily. It's just been more the situations I've been in. I'm kind of hoping now with our company, because I think one of the things that really needs to happen now in terms of these environmental issues, I think all these giant Fortune 500 companies that are making tons of money but really trashing the planet, they need to kind of become small companies, and the
Hmm.
small companies like ours now need to become the next Fortune 500 company. So I'm kind of hoping and planning to kind of
Hacking.
take that route this time instead of just passing it on to the big companies, kind of becoming the big company.
Is that because you like in the past you they haven't kind of continued your vision the way you would have liked, and when you've sold off past ventures?
Well, I think it's I think there's the corruption is just endemic in the large company world. I mean, just the whole thing about having to make a profit every 3 months, or I mean,
Right.
it's the law that if you're the CEO of a big company, you need to do everything you can to make it profitable immediately. And what we're talking about in terms of environmental issues, it's not, unfortunately, it's not that quick of a fix. You can't fix it in 1 quarter. So you need to have a bigger perspective and a different vision, and it's almost impossible for a big company to really do that. I think a lot of times when it looks like they're trying, it's just more some kind of greenwashing. So
Totally.
I think we really need a whole different economic foundation to make the changes that are needed now.
And what kind of issues are you thinking about when what comes to mind when you're talking about environmental issues in your head? And what are your thoughts on potential solutions if it's going to be large scale?
Well, I don't think so much the question is what the solutions are. It's more the motivation, because I mean I've been doing this for 50 years, and the solutions are all here. We have all the technology and all the systems and all the knowledge to really turn things around. But what's missing is the motivation. And I think, unfortunately, things probably are going to need to get a little bit worse before that motivation really picks up. Before, I mean, 20 years ago when Al Gore was talking about it and making that movie and the book, I thought that was enough to turn things around, but it didn't. And then in November, when the UN did that big report on the sustainability and the sustainable development goals, and the head of the UN was waving a flag and said, "Last chance, this crisis. We have to get it together now, or it's going to be too late." And I thought that was going to be more of a motivation, but so I guess things haven't gotten bad enough yet to get more people on board. Though slowly, more and more people are. But we need to, if we're going to really make the changes that need to be done, we need a lot bigger support base.
Yeah, I think you need to have some sort of input in people's daily lives. I mean, when it comes to like converting sales or real estate, they say the average, you have to touch. It's like a touch. Like when you reach out to someone and ask them, "Hey, do you want to buy this product?" I think you would know all about this, selling products for 50 years, that it takes 6 to 7 touches to get someone to do something. So I think probably if you want people to actually create climate action or change the way they think about the way they live, they're going to have to be consistently reminded, which is annoying because I don't like the idea of reminding people of bad things. I like to give them, spin it as opportunities. So maybe that's like a sales thing. It's like, hey, climate change realty, find your real estate agent, save the planet, like that every single day, rather than like, hey, like sell your car, the world's gonna end, sell your car. Like that's not really the way I'd want to go about it. So can you tell me about what you're doing with your most recent big project at Sustainable Village here in Boulder?
Well, we're kind of we have some things, the whole range of types of products and systems, but I guess our main focus is irrigation.
Hmm.
Water is such a huge factor, and it's and agriculture in general too. I mean, I saw one report recently that said if if the rest of the world had the same kind of lifestyle as an average American does, it would take 5 planets just for enough resources
Yep.
to supply that. So and the rest of the world's trying to become like us.
Totally.
So so it's not a very realistic situation, even though most of the world is going down that path.
Can you tell me about some of the most interesting products that you sell? If I recall, did you guys sell a composting toilet as well, or am I mistaken? You
Oh
guys
yeah,
sell
we've been
some
selling
interesting stuff.
compost toilets for 30 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Any uptake in that front? It seems really silly that we use potable water that's like the source of all life to physically move waste. It seems like there would be a better thing we could do. I mean, I know that there could be a better thing we could do. I don't know if it's
Yeah,
compost.
we've done a lot, with gray water systems,
Yeah.
and it's pretty easy to take your bath water and use it for flushing the toilet, things
Yeah.
like that. And we have one real simple kit that just attaches to your washing machine, and that's a real simple, inexpensive way to go because you don't need a pump or anything. The pump that's in the washing machine pushes the water when it's done out through your garden. So that works really well.
What type of people are purchasing stuff like this? It seems very, very niche, and it would be what we need it to be to actually fix our issues is for this kind of stuff to become mainstream. And what's crazy is it's obviously better when you use resources more efficiently. Problem is we don't water is not very expensive right now. I think
Well, it depends where you live. Yeah,
right,
and the water. I mean, every year it's kind of like that analogy of the 5 planets to give enough resources for what we're doing. I mean, the the fresh usable water every year is less and less, and the number of people needing it is more and more. And there's just there, big in the fall they really cut back on the supply of water from the Colorado River to I think 6 different states. And especially like Arizona and New Mexico and places that they weren't getting enough water before this, and now their water got cut back. I don't remember what percentage, maybe 20% or something. And so, and there's so many repercussions from that too. Desertification on a worldwide scale is really scary if you see those statistics. How much more land every year is becoming desert, and forest fires. Forest fires are increasing every year. I mean, all kinds of, and a lot of those are just related to everything drying out more. If you have grass that's all dried, it's like kindling, just easily
totally.
sparks. If it's green, it's really hard to get it to burn. So, anything we can do, and I think that's really a key to it, especially in terms of more urban type situations, because I saw this one Tibetan Lama wrote the Karmapa. He wrote a book about environmental issues, and one of the things he said was, to go back to that issue of getting more people on board. He was saying he thought that the reason it was so much harder to get urban people to be serious about environmental issues is because their environment disconnects them so much from nature. I mean, when you're surrounded by asphalt and cement, and maybe there's a park 7 or 8 blocks away you can go to once in a while, but without any kind of real personal connection with nature, it's hard to get serious about protecting it and doing things to help it. And so kind of the idea of we have a division called sustainable cities, and we're doing a lot of products that are specifically for like rooftop gardens, balcony gardens, vertical gardens, and of course like the all the small stuff too, the urban. But I think besides just the obvious benefits of of having more food. I mean, especially some of these, they call it urban deserts or urban oasis. Like, so a lot of people living in small city in inner cities, they might have to go an hour and a half on a bus just to get a head of broccoli.
Wow.
And basically all they have locally is McDonald's and Cokes. And so, so developing agricultural things in cities has lots and lots of benefits.
And are you finding that there's a lot of interest in that? Is that like who some of your customers are? They're doing these vertical and rooftop gardens?
Oh yeah, rooftop gardens are huge. I mean, for so many reasons. Not only for the crops, but they can significantly lower the temperature. I think Chicago has really been into it for a long time. I think we were working with them, I think 25 years ago, and I think they've lowered. This isn't an exact number, but I think they've lowered the temperature of the city in the summers by 15 degrees
Wow.
by having rooftop gardens, because air conditioners work by pulling the hot air out of the room and putting it into the ambient air outside. And so you have all those air conditioners, they're just increasing the hot temperatures in the cities all the time. And so if you have rooftop gardens, I mean, it just lowers the need for air conditioning tremendously.
Well, the idea of just shade in general will be probably much more efficient at cooling a property than running a fan that's powered by fossil fuels and pushing air out. I mean, if you just literally just put something there, especially
Well,
if it's something that's taking the energy of the sun and converting it into life, into food, that seems like a win-win.
yeah, and fans aren't so bad, but air conditioners use a tremendous amount of energy,
Mm-hmm.
and then it also um, makes it easier to heat in the winter because you have like a garden on top, with the soil, so the insulation is so much better. So that it
Hmm.
lowers your heating bills, it lowers your air conditioning bills. You have a crop you can go up and do. There's one big grocery store in Canada that has um, they get most of their produce. They grow on the roof.
I've seen this. Yeah, it's
They
really
have
cool.
bees up there and all that. So yeah, that's something that's has I think it's already gotten a lot of momentum, but can go a lot further.
Well, because it makes a lot of sense. Because what were we doing with the roof before?
Yeah.
Nothing, right? So it's just a huge, like, land is one of the most valuable assets that exists. Like, it's if it's not being used, it's a waste of space. We should be using every single inch. And then the urban environmental stewardship, or just finding ways to integrate natural ways of living into urban life, is so essential, because most humans are going to be living in these urban environments. The population is continuing to grow, and urban environments are also better for greenhouse gas emissions. That you use things more efficiently. So, would you say that your best selling product right now is this Blue Mat water system, or do I just have a bias because I talk to Izzy all the time?
Um, well, we have lots of different customers. Um, Blue mats have kind of really become the preferred method for um, marijuana farming. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, this has it just they pay for themselves like within weeks in a marijuana situation, but they're not as kind of applicable to like growing lettuce or something. So
Huh.
so even if it makes your harvest 30 or 40% more, I mean that pays for itself if it's weed. But if you're growing lettuce, 30% more lettuce in your garden, you probably have more than you need anyway. And so it's the economics don't have the same kind of impact.
But
But
still,
so
30% is a lot, no matter what.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's just a little harder to justify if you're not growing a crop. But we have other systems, that are less expensive too, that will do the same thing
For
almost.
example,
I
for
mean, not quite
example.
as well. Well, we have this product called root demand irrigation tape, and it goes subsurface and really, really slowly lets the water out. And it can actually work too on under grass. You can put it under turf, and it eliminates almost all the evaporation. And because it goes so slow, the slower. I just wrote an article on blog on our website on called Slow Water.
Hmm.
The slower the water goes to plants, the less horizontally it goes, the more vertical. Like if you just pour water on the ground, most of it goes left and right. It goes horizontal. It goes far away from the plant roots. Whereas if you go really slow, then the water goes deeper. And if the water goes deeper, the roots go deeper. And if the roots go deeper, they have more access to minerals and nutrients um, that are deeper in the soil. And also, it makes the plant stronger for wind and environmental issues, and also makes it a lot more drought tolerant. So the basically the slower we water, the more benefits there are like that. So we have a kit like that just connects to a 5-gallon bucket or any kind of reservoir that you can manually fill up, or have a float valve in it, so you can just hook it up to your garden hose, and gravity feeds your garden. So you don't need any electricity or batteries or timers or pressure reducers. So it's really inexpensive. And basically, you can kind of set it up in the spring and come back and harvest in the fall. You might want to come check weeds and stuff, but
How do you like find out about all these different opportunities, vertical gardens, different ways of distributing water, solar panels? Are you like reading articles all the time, or reading books, or do you watch documentaries, or have you been getting into circles for years, just talking to people?
yeah, I've been basically doing it my whole life. I mean, I remember the Whole Earth catalog was a big impetus in that direction when it came out. I don't know, 1969 or 70 or something like that. But I read all through it, every page. And back in those days, it was a typewriter and envelopes with stamps. But I wrote to all the companies in the Whole Earth catalog that looked interesting, and got set up with different, business accounts. In the 90s, we had like over 10,000 products on our website, all environmental.
Can you tell me about your experience with your company? What is it? Is it called China Direct?
Oh, Green China Direct. That's
Green
kind of
China
a different
Direct.
company. That's a different
Yeah.
company. So yeah, I've always kind of been really interested in Chinese philosophy, and
Oh.
Lao Tzu and Chuangzi, and even Confucius and things like that. And so I was always kind of on the edge of China. And then when in the late '70s, when Deng Xiaoping and Jimmy Carter, they kind of it used to be called the bamboo curtain. So in 1979, they kind of opened that door, and I started a company to deal with to import and export from China called Green China Direct. And so I went over there as one of the first. I mean, it wasn't legal to go there before that, and so it was
Really?
really interesting because you know I went to so many people, where the populations has never seen a white person before, and so it's really interesting. I'd be walking on the sidewalk, and a bus would go by, and you'd look up, and there were about 50 people looking out the window back at me to see. It was you'd stop on the street, and there would be like 80 people surrounding you, watching what you were doing. It
It's like
was
a kangaroo walking down the middle of the city road.
yeah. So yeah, I started doing that then.
So, what exactly would you go there, and you would so your interest actually came from a desire to kind of learn what their culture was like, what their way of looking at the world. You said you're interested in their philosophies, and then you started cultivating these business relationships with the suppliers of some kind.
Well, yeah, that was. I mean, the philosophical side of it was kind of before I started going there, and then when I started going there, it was all business things.
So, what kind of stuff would you get from there for your businesses? Like,
Well, I remember talking to Chinese engineers about solar panels and seeing things, and I think we were the first. We kind of invented those. They're pretty common now, but those bamboo dish racks.
mhm,
We've seen those little bamboo dish racks and stuff,
sure.
and then and wall things. So that was my idea way back then, and we started importing them, and then they kind of as another one of those things that kind of hit the mass market more. But it was always kind of appropriate technology oriented. I was really interested in their wind generators. My first trip there, I think in 19 when was that 1980? I guess I went to a
Wow.
big hydroelectric conference because China at that time, I think still they have something like 70% of all the world's micro hydro systems. So I went to a big business conference there on micro hydro. There's one in Boulder actually that's been here forever, just up Sunshine Canyon. So a big 5,000. And any of the person who did that um, helped me get into China because even though it was open, you needed to be invited and
Sure.
have some kind of references to go. So the person who did that hydro plant in Boulder, I think that was way back. I think because he was Chinese, so he could go there before it opened up to Westerners. And so, I think it's still running, still working. But anyway, so I was really interested in and also biogas. China was kind of had furthered the. I mean, it was really common to use the waste for cooking and lighting, biogas.
Hmm. How many times have you been to China?
Oh, I don't know, 40 or 50 times. I've spent
Wow.
more than 2 years there.
Gee. What are your thoughts on the future economic relations between the U.S. and China, based on what you
I don't
understand?
know. It's a little dicey. I hope they can get
Totally.
rid of Xi Jinping. He's I think he's the worst leader China's had since Mao.
No
And
kidding.
but hopefully his kind of cozying up to Putin will be his downfall. I think he's really bad for China, and I'm hoping they can replace him with somebody has a little bit more sanity.
Do you think that people feel similar to that, or from people that you might know?
Well, the people I think are not very political. They're mostly just into surviving and
Yeah.
into their personal lives and stuff. I know, yeah, especially after the Tiananmen Square thing happened. I have a Chinese wife and son, and she was part of that Tiananmen Square protest. But after that, there was such a huge crackdown, and it's so authoritarian. It's really hard to. It's not as bad as Russia, where if you call the Ukraine invasion a war, you go to jail for 15 years.
No
So
kidding.
it's not quite that bad, but it's still, it's pretty far from being a free, open society.
Do you think we could increase manufacturing and make our own products here in the U.S. in the future?
To some extent, yeah. We're kind of we just set up a new division in Mexico. So we have our business registered. We have a separate business registered in Mexico now, and I think I'm kind of thinking and hoping that Mexico can take a lot of that manufacturing away from China and do it, especially because the shipping costs have gotten so crazy. I mean, 2 years ago, the cost of bringing a container here,
Hmm.
right now, it's 1,200% higher than it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, well, that's the pandemic thing going on.
And now so I was hoping
Price
it
of
was going to go
gas.
down after the pandemic, but now with all the the embargoes of Russia, that
Right,
because
right,
the way
right.
that those parts work, the containers are in a queue and they get lined up to go on the containers, and so they can't ship the Russian ones now, but they're in the queue, and all the other containers are behind them. So it's kind of creating a big log jam and stuff in there too. So it's I don't it doesn't look like the container shipping costs are going to go down as quickly as I was hoping not too long ago.
Well, there's never a small list of issues to tackle, is there? That's what makes being an entrepreneur and living life fun. If it was all fixed, we'd be bored. We'd just be laying in meadows with nothing to do, right?
Well, I retired twice and it got too boring, the
Right.
last 10 years. And I hope I never have to do that again. It's so, I just love doing business and it's so much more meaningful and fun than sitting around and watching TV or, playing golf or, traveling.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all to hear you say that. I mean, perhaps you could spend some more time studying like ancient Chinese philosophy and thinking about what it means to be a human and what is my son and my wife, who am I? But that's the kind of stuff I like. I was a philosophy minor. I always loved thinking about that kind of stuff. So as far as like practical advice for someone who's really into sustainability here in the USA, what do you think are some of like the lowest hanging fruit lifestyle changes people could make to create a maximum positive impact on the environment?
Well, I think it's important to start small, on a small scale. I think that a lot of solutions kind of fail because people try to, that curve, that innovation curve, there where there's
Technological innovation
two
curve,
and a
yeah.
half percent are innovators, and then you get 15% that are early adopters, and then you get into the mainstream, and it's uh it's really hard to skip that initial phase and
Hmm.
and start on a large scale like that. And I think before things can really make that jump from the early adopters to the mainstream, things have to be really proven. Innovators and early adopters, they really like the idea of being a guinea pig and trying something out that might not work. And it's kind of like prestige almost. Like I bought the first iPhone, and you know so
Yeah.
but most people are going to want to wait until something has really been tried and proven, and there's a whole bunch of people saying how great it is. So I think it's much more effective to start small and gradually get the momentum going.
Hmm.
It's like physics where you have inertia. The hardest thing is to overcome that inertia and get something going. And so I think, just to answer your question, maybe the best thing somebody might do is grow a houseplant.
Oh.
Just get something going. Relate to nature. Have deal with soil and dirt and the plant and water, and just kind of have some kind of more connection to those elemental basic life forces.
Yeah. I mean, I might even make the argument that you should start a gym routine, because then you actually teach yourself discipline. I'm going to show up to the gym once a week. If you're really passionate about improving your world and being a good steward to the planet, but you're always busy with lots of things, I think starting with having discipline in your life and really being rigidly committed to something and proving to yourself, I can go to the gym every week for a year. That's kind of what comes to my mind. Do you think we're gonna reach a point where like regenerative policies and connection with nature is like really mainstream? Could you think of a way where we could use markets to create a fully regenerative global economy? Because that's what I'm like really passionate about.
Well, I think we either need to do that or kind of just let the world burn up. You know, so I mean, it doesn't even seem like a choice to me. I mean, uh, and I just think it's just kind of a process of being patient for more people to realize that. But I mean, we have to do that sooner or later. And the sooner we do it, the less negative effects we're going to have. But we have to do it at some point if we're going to survive.
How patient can we be when you're talking about if we're gonna survive though?
Well, well, well. I think that's again, like thinking about the big scale versus what we can do on a personal level. And so, and I think that's one of the problems. We kind of look at some of these big problems, like say forest fires,
Hmm.
and we think, well, that's something that I can't do anything about preventing forest fires. That's something that the governments have to do, or big NGOs, or nonprofits, or big forest department, or whatever. But actually, what they've been doing has just been making things worse. The whole. I mean, it's really
Yeah.
scandalous. The forest department has made all these deals with the logging companies. When to log the forest, and before there was a lot of environmental pushback on it, they they just called it logging. And then when people started saying, wait, that's really causing all these problems, and they say, oh, well, now we're doing forest fire prevention, and they were doing the same thing,
Slocking.
and
Yeah.
they're actually making forest fires much more common and much worse, because they're clear cutting these forests, and then there's a spark from a fire, and there's nothing to slow it down or stop it, and it just goes right through, and gets close to houses and things. So, and in fact, just in terms of that example, in terms of forest fire prevention, there's books that say anything you do that's more than 120 feet around your house isn't going to help. But the 120 feet around your house, you can really make a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
And there's these zones. There's like the 25 feet around it, and then 25 to 80, and then 80 to 125. And there's different kinds of things you can do in there. Like both the kinds of plants you grow. Like some things are really easily burned. Like with trees. You know, um, Evergreen trees like pines and firs. Those little needles have so much oil in them. They're really easy to burn. Deciduous trees, the leaves fall off, and they're much harder. So you don't want to have evergreen trees really close to your house if you're in any kind of a threat of forest fires. So there's just a lot of really simple, easy things that people can do just around your own house. So you just need to get that momentum going.
Yeah, and like stuff like planting native plants, or yeah, not planting kindling everywhere. I like that idea. It's very interesting to me that the 180 feet around your house, because that's basically what the entire planet is comprised of. It's whether it's 180 feet of land, or it's a group of 10 people in your family who are then connected to another bubble of people next door. They're your neighbors, and then they have a family. We're all connected through these little pockets of, whether it's people or life forms or ideas, all connected by these little groupings. And if you take care of your little bubble, it kind of can spread, and it would positively infect the bubble next door. I think that's cool.
And,
Any Go ahead.
and I think that's a really critical point, because I think when the average person looks at some of these environmental crises we're facing, it's so overwhelming, and it's hard for people to do much besides just get depressed. But if they know about all these different things that they can do, then it not only helps things, but it pulls them out of their depression. And you can even get excited about doing this stuff. It's because it's really energizing and inspiring, and you're really making a big difference on a small scale. And that, it's kind of like, throwing a rock in the lake or something, where there's just this little hole where the rock goes in, but then the ripples go all the way out all over. And I think most people don't realize what kind of an impact they have, but it's really big.
I especially as Americans, and I don't want to say that like everyone can be like Da Vinci or Steve Jobs, but what you got to realize is that those one people, that one person, had a huge impact on all 8 billion people who are still alive today. And that can be you, and it doesn't need to be 8 billion people. But what if you affected 50,000 people? Would that be enough for it to be meaningful enough for you to make a change in your life today? I think this is a really interesting thing to talk about, and I think it's more relevant than ever in the US as a young person facing the most disasterly ecological crises of all time. I think that a coalition of the right forces can really change the world. I don't think it anymore. The evidence is too strong. So that's like who are listening right now, what are you going to do with that information? Are you going to drift, or are you going to do something and take action? But well, Steve, it's been great having you on the podcast, man. Any final pieces of advice for young folks who are passionate about creating those positive ripple effects?
Hmm. Um, well, I think it's a big challenge, because we're so brainwashed with this whole capitalistic religion that we're inundated in. I just read a book recently that was describing capitalism as a religion,
Sure.
and as the biggest religion, the fastest growing religion that the world has ever known. And he just goes through all these points about what are the basic qualities of a religion, and then how that applies to capitalism. Like Wall Street is the big cathedral, and
Oh, that's the
money's the
worst
main
people.
goal, and so it's really hard when everybody around us believes something, and we might know it's not right or it's wrong. So it takes a lot of courage, um, but It's really critical. We need to do it right away.
I have no issue with having courage. Sounds good to me. And if Wall Street's, if they're the heads of the Church of Capitalism, count me out, man. Those guys are demonic. I mean, they're not even happy with their own lives if they have so much excess in wealth. I mean, the most meaningful interactions in my day just comes from like smiling at someone. Like life is really not that complicated. Like you just love other people and you get it back, and that's kind of like it. You get the
Well,
oxytocin.
I think the switch that we need to make is from just what I can get for myself, and that's what capitalism is all about. Everything's about monetizing everything and getting as much as you can, and you never can get enough. I mean, it's incredible. Like these billionaires, and they're still not satisfied with what they have. But I think that's what really needs to change. We need to kind of tune back into to more human values rather than just money as the goal for all of life. It's it's really a false god.
I agree. I have more I could say on that, but I know you have another meeting, so it's been a pleasure having you on today, man. I guess I'll end by saying I think that we can transform the beast from within the belly. We could make money work for the people. That's why I like to talk about regenerative economics. Like you said, it's
Mhm.
inevitable. So this model of take for yourself will end you eventually. You'll just be fat and there'll be nothing left, and then you'll die because you can't eat anything else. So
Yeah,
it's not going to work.
it's not like money is some evil. Money is just a tool. So like any
Right.
tool, like a hammer, you can build a house or you can rob a bank. And so money is the same way. I mean, and I think the main problem we have now is that 1%, the people that have the most money, they're just lacking in imagination. They're lacking because there's so much they could do with that money that would make them much happier and make the world a lot better place, but they just can't rock it somehow.
This is I could go on this for a while. Um, but we'll leave it up to the imagination of the audience. And this is a conversation that is never end. This is the root of the human condition, really. What we're talking about now, the 1% and the lack of creativity and the lack of the obvious, simple solution of using your power to love others, giving you meaning rather than trying to continue to please yourself with inputs that aren't um,
And I think that's a real
valuable.
key a key to happiness. As the more we just try to get stuff for ourselves, the less happy we are. The more we try to help people, and then the more we can be successful at that, then the happier we just naturally become.
I can attest to that. Steve, I appreciate the time today, man. It's been a
All right,
pleasure.
good talking to you.
You too, man. So, if you or anyone else you know is looking to buy or sell a home anywhere in the USA and would like to create thousands of dollars in donations without any cost out of pocket, please visit ccrealty.org today.